I was standing at the international check-in counter, clutching my crumpled economy ticket, when my brother walked up behind me. I had not expected him to show up early, and I definitely had not expected what happened when that scanner turned red. The ticket in my hand felt suddenly heavier, a reminder of every assumption people make about you based on what they think they see. But sometimes the quietest person in the room is carrying the biggest secret. And sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. Before I tell you what that red screen meant and why the entire check-in counter went silent, I would love to know where you are watching this from. Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you, someone who should have known better? Drop a comment below and let me know your story. And if you are curious to see how this unfolds, if you want to see the look on my brother's face when everything he assumed about me came crashing down, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you will not want to miss what happens next. Now, let me take you back to 3 hours earlier to the family dinner that started all of this. My brother Brandon and I grew up in the same middle-class household in suburban Ohio, sharing bunk beds and hand-me-down clothes. But somewhere along the way, our paths diverged sharply. Brandon became an investment banker in Manhattan, the kind of guy who wore $1,000 suits to work and could not wait to tell you about them. He drove a silver BMW, wore a Rolex that caught the light at every opportunity, and lived in a high-rise with views of Central Park. His Instagram was a carefully curated highlight reel of business-class lounges, expensive dinners, and exotic vacation spots. I took a different route. After college, I became a software engineer at a small startup in Austin. The pay was decent enough to live comfortably, but I was not flying private or staying at 5-star hotels. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic that got me where I needed to go. I wore jeans and t-shirts to work. I lived in a modest apartment with a roommate. To look at us side by side, you would assume Brandon had won at life, and I was still figuring things out. The truth was more complicated, but I never felt the need to explain myself. I loved my work. I had flexibility and freedom. And I had made choices that prioritized happiness over a paycheck, even if those choices did not look impressive to people like Brandon. We still saw each other at family events, but the easy closeness we had as kids had faded. There was an invisible wall between us now, built brick by brick from his condescending comments and my silent tolerance. He would ask about my job with that particular tone that made it clear he thought I was wasting my potential. I would smile and change the subject. That changed 3 weeks ago at our mother's birthday dinner. Brandon had chosen the restaurant naturally. It was one of those places where the menu did not list prices, and the waiter described each dish like it was a work of art. Mom was thrilled to have both her sons there, her face glowing as she looked between us. Halfway through the meal, Brandon cleared his throat importantly. He had an announcement. He was flying to Singapore in 2 weeks for a major financial conference. His firm was sending him first class, putting him up at the Marina Bay Sands, covering all expenses. He said this casually, but his eyes kept flicking to me, measuring my reaction. Then came the part that surprised me. He turned to me with what might have looked like a generous smile to anyone who did not know him better. "Why do not you come along? Michael, could be good for you to see how real business is done. The conference is at Raffles, 5-star everything. My firm is flying me first class, of course. You should tag along. Might be educational." I felt the familiar sting of his patronizing tone, but Mom's face lit up before I could respond. "That would be wonderful. You two have not spent time together in so long. Michael, you should definitely go." I looked at my brother's face, at that smug expression that expected me to either decline or gush with gratitude. "I appreciate the offer, Brandon," I said carefully, "but I would have to book my own ticket." He laughed, actually laughed, like I had said something amusing. Right. Your startup probably does not have the corporate travel budget we do. Well, economy is not that bad for a short flight." 13 hours was not a short flight, but I did not correct him. Mom was watching us hopefully, and I found myself agreeing not because of Brandon's invitation, but because I actually had my own reasons for going to Singapore. I had been working on a freelance project for a tech company there, a contract that paid extremely well, but I had not mentioned it to my family. It was not their business, and I did not see the point in competing with Brandon's constant need for validation. Over the next week, I booked an economy ticket on the same flight. It was affordable and got me where I needed to go. That was all that mattered to me. But apparently, it mattered a great deal to Brandon. The text messages started immediately after I told him I had booked. "Lol, you actually booked economy. Should have told me I could have given you some tips on how to survive back there." With a crying, laughing emoji. I sent back a thumbs up and did not engage further. The messages continued over the following days. Photos of his new Tumi luggage set. A selfie in a fitting room wearing an Armani suit. Screenshots of business class lounge reviews. Each one was a small dig, a reminder of the gap he perceived between us. I did not respond to most of them. What Brandon did not know, what no one in my family knew, was that over the past 3 years, my career had taken me all over the world. The startup I worked for had clients across Asia, Europe, and South America. I had been flying internationally almost monthly, sometimes twice a month, working remotely from different time zones, building relationships with companies that valued my expertise enough to fly me out repeatedly. I had accumulated miles, a lot of miles, enough to earn Diamond Elite status with the airline the highest tier lifetime. It came with perks I rarely used because I did not care much about the extras. Complimentary upgrades when available, access to premium lounges, priority everything. But I never mentioned it because it seemed like bragging, and that was Brandon's style, not mine. The night before our flight, Mom called. "I am so happy you boys are doing this together," she said, her voice warm. "Take care of each other, okay?" "We will, Mom." I promised, though I suspected Brandon and I would barely see each other once we landed. The morning of the flight, I arrived at the international terminal 2 hours early. I preferred having time to relax before boarding, maybe grab coffee and check my email. The terminal was already busy with travelers, dragging suitcases and checking departure boards. I headed toward the economy check-in counters, my old backpack slung over one shoulder, my boarding pass pulled up on my phone. The line was not too long yet. I took my place and waited, scrolling through work messages. That was when I heard his voice. "Oh, you are already here. I thought economy passengers checked in later." I looked up. Brandon was walking toward me, pulling his gleaming Tumi suitcase behind him. He wore dark slacks and a crisp button-down shirt, looking every inch the successful businessman. His Rolex caught the overhead lights as he gestured. "Morning, Brandon," I said evenly. "Flight is in 2 hours. Wanted to get here early." He stopped beside me, his eyes dropping to the phone in my hand, where my digital boarding pass was displayed. His lips curved into that familiar smirk. Then, in a gesture that made my stomach clench, he reached out and plucked the phone from my hand, holding it between his thumb and index finger like it was contaminated. "This is all you can handle, huh?" he said loudly enough that the people around us looked over. "Economy! Window seat, I hope. At least you will have something to look at for 13 hours. I took my phone back without responding. A woman behind me in line shifted uncomfortably. A businessman in front pretended to be very interested in his luggage tag. Brandon was not finished. "You know, Michael, if you had focused more on your career instead of doing what you love," he made air quotes around the last phrase, "you might be up here with me." He gestured toward the first-class counter across the terminal, where there was no line at all. "I am fine here, Brandon," I said quietly. "You go ahead. Come on, let me show you how the other half travels." He actually grabbed my arm, trying to pull me out of line. "You should at least see what you are missing." "Brandon, I am good. Really." I pulled my arm back gently. He shrugged, that infuriating smirk still in place. "Suit yourself. I will be in the lounge, sipping champagne, while you are well sitting at the gate with everyone else." He paused, looking me up and down. Maybe next time you will invest in your career a little more, huh? I said nothing. There was nothing to say that would not start an argument, and I had learned a long time ago that arguing with Brandon only fed his ego. He wanted a reaction. I would not give him one. He walked away toward the first-class counters, and I watched him go, feeling that familiar mix of hurt and frustration. It was not about the money or the class of ticket. It was about the assumption, the dismissiveness, the casual cruelty dressed up as brotherly teasing. Brandon made a show of his check-in process. Even from across the terminal I could hear him. Yes, aisle seat would be perfect, and I will take the extra amenity kit if you have one available. Oh, and I pre-ordered the lobster for the meal service. He kept glancing back at me, making sure I was watching, making sure I felt small. When he finished, he actually walked back over to where I was still waiting in line. I had moved up a few spots, but economy check-in was slower than first class. All set, he announced. Premium lounge access priority boarding the works. He leaned in, lowering his voice just slightly. You sure you do not want to upgrade? I could lend you some miles. Might make the flight more bearable. I am good, thanks, I repeated. All right, little brother. He clapped me on the shoulder, hard enough that I had to step forward to keep my balance. See you on the plane. Well, not really. You will be way back there. He laughed at his own joke, then started walking toward the premium lounge area. He turned back one more time. Oh, and Michael, try not to fight over the armrest. Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd with his expensive luggage and his expensive clothes and his expensive sense of superiority. The woman behind me in line leaned forward slightly. Brothers? She asked sympathetically. Yeah, I said. I am sorry, she said, and I could tell she meant it. I finally reached the front of the line. The agent was a woman named Sarah, according to her name tag. She was maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and a professional smile. Good morning, sir, she said warmly. Singapore today. Yes, please. I handed her my passport and pulled my phone back out to show my boarding pass. She scanned the barcode, her fingers moving quickly over the keyboard as information populated her screen. Then she placed my passport on the scanner. That was when everything changed. The computer screen flashed red. Bright, unmistakable red. Sarah's eyes went wide. Her mouth actually fell open slightly. She looked from the screen to me, then back to the screen, like she was trying to reconcile what she was seeing with what she had expected. She started, then stopped. Her hand moved to her chest. I am sorry, Mr. Thompson. Please give me one moment. Behind me, the businessman who had been so interested in his luggage tag earlier spoke up. Is something wrong? I kept my expression neutral. Is there a problem? I asked Sarah calmly. No problem at all, sir, she said quickly, but her hands were shaking slightly as she picked up the phone at her station. I just need to call my supervisor. This will only take a moment. The agent at the counter next to us had noticed. She glanced over at Sarah's screen, and I saw her eyebrows shoot up. She whispered something to her own customer, who also looked over. Sarah spoke quietly into the phone, but I caught fragments. Diamond Elite. Lifetime status. Yes, he is here now. Okay, you are coming down. She hung up and gave me an apologetic smile. My manager will be right here, Mr. Thompson. Can I get you some water while you wait? I am fine, thank you. The line behind me was getting restless. People were checking their watches, craning their necks to see what the holdup was. Sarah kept glancing between me and her screen, clearly out of her depth. Less than 2 minutes later, a man in a dark suit appeared, walking quickly across the terminal floor. His name tag read James Chen, Terminal Manager. He was maybe in his mid-40s, with graying hair at his temples, and an air of calm authority. He reached the counter, glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor shifted. His eyes widened. Then he looked at me, with an expression I could not quite read. Respect, maybe. Surprise, definitely. "Mr. Thompson," he said, extending his hand, "I apologize for the confusion. Sarah is new to our international desk and has not encountered this particular status before." He turned slightly toward Sarah, speaking in a voice that was professional, but loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "This is Diamond Elite status, lifetime. We do not see this often. Only a few thousand people worldwide hold it." Sarah's face went pale. "Oh my God, I am so sorry, sir. I did not realize I have never seen—" "It is fine, really," I said. "No problem at all." But James was already moving his fingers flying over the keyboard. "We would like to offer you a complimentary upgrade to first class, Mr. Thompson. And please accept our apologies for any inconvenience or delay." "Thank you," I said simply. "I appreciate it." That was when I heard a familiar voice from behind me. "Still not checked in yet? Economy line that slow?" I turned. Brandon had come back, probably heading to the gate early, or maybe he had forgotten something. He was grinning, ready to make another joke at my expense. Then his eyes dropped to the boarding pass that James was printing out. His grin faltered. "Wait," Brandon said, stepping closer, his voice uncertain. "What is that? Is that first class?" James looked up, his professional smile firmly in place. "Yes, sir. We have upgraded Mr. Thompson to first class. Complimentary, of course, for our Diamond Elite lifetime members." The color drained from Brandon's face, then rushed back in a flood of red. "Diamond Elite," he repeated, like he had misheard. "Lifetime." "That is, there are only a handful of people in the country with that status." "Several thousand worldwide," James corrected politely. "It requires significant loyalty to the airline. Mr. Thompson has clearly done a great deal of flying with us." Brandon looked at me, then at the boarding pass in my hand, then back at me. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The businessman behind me, the one who had witnessed Brandon's earlier mockery, made a small noise that might have been a suppressed laugh. I did not know you flew that much," Brandon finally managed. "You never said—" "I have been working with some international clients," I said calmly. "Consulting work. Didn't think it was worth mentioning." That was true as far as it went. Over the past 3 years, I had flown to Singapore 7 times, Tokyo 4 times, London 6 times, and Berlin twice, among other trips. Most were for the startup. Some were freelance contracts like the current one. I had been living out of hotels and airports for months at a time, building relationships and expertise that happened to come with a lot of frequent flyer miles. Brandon tried to recover. "If I had known you had status like that, I would not have—" He trailed off, apparently unable to figure out how to finish that sentence without admitting what he had been doing. "I mean, I just thought you were—" "It is okay, Brandon," I said, cutting him off. "See you on the plane." James handed me my new boarding pass and a small folder. "Your lounge access pass, Mr. Thompson. Gate 12 for boarding, but you are welcome to relax in the Diamond Lounge until then. Priority boarding, of course. Have an excellent flight." I thanked him, picked up my backpack, and followed his directions toward the premium lounge area. The same area Brandon had disappeared into 15 minutes ago, so smug and self-satisfied. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of voices. The woman who had sympathized with me earlier said something I could not quite make out, but her tone was approving. The businessman laughed openly now. Brandon stood frozen at the counter, his expensive luggage beside him, his expensive watch catching the light, looking suddenly very small. The Diamond Lounge was everything you would expect. Plush seating, quiet music, a fully stocked bar, and a buffet that looked like it belonged in a high-end restaurant. I walked in, showed my pass to the attendant, and found a seat in a corner with a view of the runway. Brandon was already there. He was sitting in one of the leather armchairs near the window staring at his phone, but I could tell he was not really looking at it. When I walked past, he glanced up, our eyes met, and he immediately looked away. I chose a seat on the opposite side of the lounge. Not to avoid him exactly, but because I did not need the confrontation. I had not upgraded to first class to rub his nose in it. I would have been perfectly content in economy. The upgrade was a courtesy from the airline, not something I had asked for or needed. I pulled out my laptop and started working on some code. The Singapore project was nearly finished, but there were still a few bugs to iron out. I lost myself in the work the way I always did, until the boarding announcement came over the speakers. We would now like to invite our first-class passengers and Diamond Elite members to begin boarding at Gate 12. I packed up my laptop and headed for the gate. Brandon was a few steps behind me. I could feel him there, could hear the wheels of his Toomey case on the carpeted floor, but neither of us spoke. At the gate, the agent scanned my boarding pass and greeted me by name. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Thompson. Thank you for your continued loyalty. Your seat is 3A. I walked down the jetway and onto the plane. The first-class cabin was small and intimate, just 12 seats in a 2-2 configuration. 3A was a window seat in the second row. I stowed my backpack in the overhead compartment and settled in. Brandon's seat, I noticed, was 4C. Directly across the aisle from me, one row back. I did not acknowledge him as he sat down. A flight attendant came by immediately offering champagne or orange juice. I took water. Brandon took champagne, his hand shaking slightly as he accepted the glass. The cabin filled slowly with the other first-class passengers. A businesswoman in a power suit. An elderly couple holding hands. A young tech entrepreneur who looked like he had not slept in days. Once everyone was seated, the flight attendant returned to my seat with a warm smile. "Mr. Thompson, it is so good to see you again. How was Tokyo? Productive, thank you," I said, realizing I had been on this same route with this same crew member 6 months ago. "Wonderful. Let me know if you need anything during the flight. We are happy to have you with us." From across the aisle, I heard Brandon inhale sharply. He had heard that exchange, had heard the familiarity in her voice, the recognition. He was starting to understand just how wrong he had been about my life. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Brandon finally spoke. "Michael." I looked over at him. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "About earlier. About all of it. I had no idea you—" "It is fine, Brandon," I interrupted gently. "Let us just enjoy the flight." "But I was such a jerk. I assumed—" "You assumed wrong. It happens." I was not trying to be harsh, but I was not particularly interested in his apology either. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some things could not be smoothed over with a simple sorry. He nodded slowly and turned to look out his own window. I did the same. Below us, the runway lights began to blur as we accelerated for takeoff. The flight itself was long but comfortable. The seats converted to fully flat beds. The meals were restaurant quality. The flight attendants were attentive without being intrusive. I watched a movie worked on my laptop and slept for a few hours. Brandon tried a few more times to start conversations. Small talk about the conference, about Singapore, about Mom. I responded politely, but did not elaborate. I was not being cruel, I just did not have much to say to him. The gulf between us had been there for years, and one flight was not going to bridge it, upgraded seat or not. About halfway through the flight, after the cabin lights had dimmed and most passengers were sleeping, Brandon got up to use the restroom. On his way back, he paused at my seat. "I really am sorry, Michael," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have been so focused on my career, on proving myself, that I did not see what you were doing. I assumed you were struggling, that you were less successful than me. And that made me feel better about myself, which is messed up. You are my brother. I should have been happy for you, proud of you regardless of what kind of ticket you were holding." I looked up at him. In the dim cabin light, he looked older than I remembered. Tired. Maybe even a little lost. "I appreciate that," I said. He nodded and returned to his seat. I went back to my movie, but something had shifted just slightly. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of understanding. We landed in Singapore in the early morning, the sun just starting to rise over the city skyline. The plane taxied to the gate, and we gathered our belongings. Brandon moved slowly, carefully, like he was navigating unfamiliar territory. At the airport, we cleared customs and retrieved our luggage. Brandon's Toomey case looked somehow less impressive now. My old backpack was still just an old backpack, but the context had changed everything. In the arrivals hall, we stood facing each other. This was where we would part ways. Brandon was heading to his 5-star hotel. I was heading to a more modest place near the tech company's office. "Michael," Brandon said, and this time his voice was different, genuine. No trace of the smugness or condescension from before. "I really am sorry, not just for today, but for years of this, years of making you feel less than. You never needed to prove anything to anyone, and I made it seem like you did." "We all have different paths, Brandon," I said. "Yours is not better or worse than mine, just different." He nodded slowly. Can we get dinner while we are here? Actually talk for once." I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, we can do that." His face brightened a little. "Thank you." We exchanged numbers and agreed to meet up in 2 days after his conference sessions were done. Then we went our separate ways, disappearing into the crowded terminal. Over the next few days, something unexpected happened. Brandon texted me, not with pictures of his conference or his hotel room, but with actual questions. About my work, about Singapore, about what I thought of certain restaurants or neighborhoods. The messages were tentative at first, like he was not sure how to talk to me without the armor of superiority he had worn for so long. We met for dinner at a hawker center, one of those open-air food courts, where you can get incredible meals for a few dollars. It was about as far from 5-star as you could get, and I suggested it partly as a test. Brandon showed up in jeans and a polo shirt, his Rolex notably absent. We talked for 3 hours. Really talked for the first time in years. He told me about the pressure at his firm, the constant need to perform, to outdo his colleagues, to justify his position. He talked about how exhausting it was, how lonely, how he had started measuring his worth by his bonus and his business class upgrades, because those were the only metrics that seemed to matter. I told him about my work, about the satisfaction of solving complex problems, about the freedom of remote work and building relationships across continents. I told him I was not rich, probably never would be, and I was okay with that. "I spent so long thinking you needed rescuing," Brandon said as we finished our food. "Turns out you were doing just fine, better than fine." "I never needed rescuing," I agreed. "Just respect." "You had it," he said. "You always had it. I was just too insecure to show it." It was not a magical fix. One dinner could not undo years of damage, but it was a start, a genuine start. When we said goodbye at the airport 4 days later, the hug felt real. Not obligatory, not performative, real. On the flight home, I sat in economy. I had not bothered requesting an upgrade. The seat was fine. The flight was fine. I worked on my laptop, watched a movie, slept a little. It was exactly the same experience I would have had before any of this happened, and that was exactly how I wanted it. But I thought about that moment at the check-in counter, when the screen flashed red, and everything Brandon assumed about me came crashing down. I did not feel triumphant about it the way I might have imagined. Mostly I felt sad that it had taken something like that for my brother to see me clearly. A few weeks later, back home in Austin, I got a call from Mom. "I do not know what happened in Singapore," she said, "but Brandon has been different since you got back. Quieter, more thoughtful. He asked about your work the other day. Really asked like he wanted to understand it." "What did you two talk about?" "Just life, Mom," I said. "Just life." Brandon and I talk more now. Not constantly, but regularly. He still makes more money than I do. Still flies first class, for work still lives in that Manhattan high-rise. I still drive my Honda Civic, still live in my modest apartment, still prioritize passion over paychecks. but he stopped making comments about it, stopped measuring our lives against each other like we were in some kind of competition only he knew about. And sometimes, when I check in at the airport and that scanner screen flashes red, I remember that morning. Not because it felt good to prove Brandon wrong, but because it taught me something important. You do not need to announce your worth to the world. You do not need to justify your choices or defend your path. The right people will see it, and the ones who matter will respect it regardless of which class you are sitting in. I learned something else too. Sometimes the best response to judgment is not a defense, not an explanation, not even a contradiction. Sometimes the best response is simply living your life authentically and letting the truth speak for itself. It might take longer. It might be harder. But when the moment comes, when that screen finally flashes red, the impact is so much more powerful than any argument you could have made. Success looks different for everyone. For Brandon, it is the corner office and the business class ticket. For me, it is the freedom to work on projects I care about and the knowledge that I built my career on my own terms. Neither of us is wrong. We just took different roads. But here is what I wish I could tell my younger self standing in that economy line with my brother mocking my ticket. The people who truly matter, the people worth keeping in your life, will never measure your value by the class of your seat, or the car you drive, or the address on your business card. They will measure it by your character, your integrity, and how you treat others when nobody is watching. And if they cannot see that, well, sometimes a red screen can help clear their vision. So, let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you, where someone made assumptions about your life without knowing the full story? How did you handle it? Did you speak up right away, or did you let the truth reveal itself? Drop a comment below and share your experience. I read every single one, and I would love to hear your story. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that worth cannot be measured in dollars or status symbols, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. And subscribe to the channel, because I share stories like this every week. Stories about real life, real struggles, and the lessons we learn when we least expect them. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here, and remember, the next time someone tries to measure your worth by their standards, just smile and keep being yourself. The truth always comes out eventually. And when it does, it is so much more powerful than anything you could have said. Take care of yourselves out there, be kind to each other, and never let anyone make you feel small for choosing your own path. Until next time.